President and Chairman, Council, distinguished council members, the Chairman of the Membership Committee, please allow me to proceed on well-established protocols so that I optimize the time we have together. I am fascinated by the concept of membership organizations. I have been for a very long time. And the reason is I do not think that we can build a modern society without membership organizations. The concept of membership organizations or institutes comes from the knowledge society movement. The knowledge society movement came out of the Industrial Revolution. First and second Industrial Revolution birthed the need to reorganize labor based on specializations. Those specializations gave an immediate impetus to communities of practice, where intellectual elites are continuing to contribute to the building of bodies of knowledge or practice that drove that specialization. Therefore, you cannot discuss in any significant way the evolution of a nation or a people outside of these bodies of members that come together. And that's why I have tagged my short talk this morning, Members for Life. And I'm hoping that it will convey both the spirit, but also the practices and the tools to think through this very important subject. But more importantly, it will also convey the meaning of unlocking the power of the membership economies. I cannot go forward here. Where do I need to go to there? Okay, get me going where I go. So the advancement of the knowledge societies is the key to understanding membership economy, right? The role of the intellectual elite in the Nigerian society has followed a very similar pathway. I was having a conversation with a prof. I said, I remember that when you discussed ICSA, my memory was you discuss it at parity with ICAD. And if today there is any difference between the two, we must interrogate it and get on the way. Because when we spoke of intellectual elites in the what I like to call the pre-modern Nigerian economic system, anything before 1999, ICSAN was part of that conversation and must remain part of that conversation. So the essential requirement of the intellectual elite is to be organized into communities of practice that thrive as membership economies. And why we call it economies? Because it must be efficient and it must be value-driven. Cannot afford an economy by design must be efficient, it must be value-driven, it must have a demand and a supply. This seen online, we can no longer see here. Okay. So, unfortunately, as Nigeria has evolved as a state, we've had some problems. Power has been concentrated around other elites who are not necessarily intellectual elites. So if you look at the formation of power, those that have determined who governs Nigeria since 1960, we began with a very strong political elite coming out of colonial rule. That political elite was supported by the first set of Nigerian intellectuals with a lot of great hope. but most of our intellectuals were burdened with building the first educational institutions. So they stayed out of politics on purpose, you know? So if the fathers of the Nigerian education system thought it was important that whilst town was busy doing town, down should go and do the work of commanding heights of the ivory tower in terms of intellectual firepower that would then back national development. Little did they know that whilst they were in the ivory tower, that the military and political elite will hijack the Nigerian state. And by the time the intellectual elite came down from the tower, the rest, they say, is history. It wasn't until we started to see the emergence of the modern manufacturing base in Nigeria that required a corporate structure that the question about professions came back into the conversation. Who will be the lawyers? Who will be the accountants? Who will be the engineers on the plant floor? Suddenly, that created this drive. So what we call the five disciplines that came straight out the door. Medicine, of course, it wasn't about how to be well, but for lawyers, accountants, economists, and then engineers naturally became the signature professions because it reflected where we were as a country. Unfortunately, as power formation continued, it happened without the intellectual elites and remained so. We were only called into the room after the people collected power to be asked the few questions. So on a consistent basis, Nigeria was shaped not by intellectual elite, but by military and political elite, with intellectual elite playing a narrative or advisory role. This is important to stress because as we think of our future, we would like to not only influence the different elites outside the intellectual elite, but to ask the question whether intellectual elite should not conceptualize its own form of power in leading Nigeria into the future, and whether that is not possible to us. When you think of nation building has 5 processes, no matter the country, no matter how they started, from China to Nigeria, from Britain to Russia. You will find 5 basic elements of a nation state that emerges. One is the emergence of institutions. And of those institutions, 3 are worthy of note. Military, because of the monopoly of violence. You are not a nation state, there's a modern state, except your state has monopoly of violence and cohesive force within the boundaries of the rule of law. When you begin to have multipoly of violence, it means this. That's what we call a fragile state. When many people have franchises of violence outside the state, we call it a weak state, which is why, of course, some of us characterize Nigeria by the fragility of the multiple franchises of violence. Second key institution is the civil service or the public service, or the combination of those that serve the public interest. So that's what we call state institutions. But then we have what we call economic growth institutions. Economic growth institution is fundamentally built on the structure of the firm. That the firm is the unit of economic growth. That a collection of firms that form markets and clusters form amongst themselves a jurisdiction within which certain rules that govern the ethics of business, enterprise, and exchange can hold. Okay? And then we have institutions of social mobilization, so the civil society organizations. And then, of course, we have the institutions of the rule of law, judiciary and legislation. And lastly, you have what we call the institutions of accountability. These are the institutions that emerge differently in each country. In Nigeria, we will basically be discussing INEC and everything that guarantees that the electoral process creates democratic accountability, which is the type of accountability described in Nigeria. The question is, what role should intellectual elite play in any of the national or the nation building processes? Should they, I'm stuck again, can somebody just help me move this? Should they play a role that is more observant? Should they play a role that is more advisory or participant? I am of a strong view that if the intellectual elites are not the dominant players in the institutions that shape a nation, the nation will fail. That is my view, and it's kind of accentuated by my own study of history. There is no nation that moves forward where intellectual elite is not giving life to these different institutions. Now, when we come to ICSAN in particular, the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators, who by design are governance professionals, you automatically can ask a simple question. You look at these 5 governance processes, where should governance professionals play? And where do governance professionals have a stake? Should we simply have restricted ourselves to the economic growth institutions within the corporate firm, which, like the chairman of the committee discussed, has been our traditional forte? Or should we begin to reconceptualize the role of governance professionals and chartered secretaries and administrators to be wherever governance is needed, which will then be in every institutional expression within the nation building process? If that's the case, then we may be able to reconceptualize what our role is in building a nation of our dreams. And so my first challenge to you as intellectual elite is, where does your governance profession stop conceptually? And can we force this, this elite membership summit to push the boundaries of the governance professional construct a little bit further, to do some of the work that all of us know is still left undone? Because when you look at our state institutions, they fail because they are badly governed. Again, they fail because governance processes fail. Big issues of ethical failures, institutional collapse are pervade. When you look at our National Assembly, I was saying to someone, the clerk of the National Assembly at committee level fulfills 99% of the roles of the chartered secretary and administrator, even though he's not called that. That's what he does. He does it all year long. And there is no viable path for them to the ICSAN membership. Chief of staffs, they are chief of staffs at local, federal, state, across the country. They all fulfill standardized roles. If you look at your functions of a chartered secretary and administrator, they fulfill it all day long by function, and there is no viable path of membership for them within the ICSAN process. When you look at what we call executive secretaries in civil society, they are CEO, administrator secretaries. They fulfill many of the binding principles because they serve as executive secretaries, but they report to the board of trustees. They fulfill exactly the same principle. So in terms of pathway of CSO, executive secretaries to membership, there's a viable pathway. I can go on and on, ladies and gentlemen. I think my point is pretty clear, that in reconceptualizing or reconstructing the governance professional that Nigeria needs, we may herein find unique opportunities. But why join a membership economy? I think the chairman put it aptly. Nobody joins it for joining's sake. It's not like they lack places to go and join. In fact, the problem we have is you're joining too many things. At the beginning of the year, we go through processes where they're telling us to drop some things, but we're carrying too much. So the question is, why keep ICSAN in a basket? I have 5 institutes to belong to. Participating actively, why pick ICSAN? So you must answer some questions, and there are 4 big dynamics in membership economy. The first is community of practice. Most people will commit to a membership economy where the professional practice is a requirement for their success. In other words, how we have built the community of practice and the body of knowledge that gives force to that practice is one reason why members will stay members. And so you want to look at how the community of practice has formed, how it celebrates the practice, how it promotes the practice, how it rewards the practice, how it immortalizes those that have gone ahead of us and practiced. Some of the competitors that have been mentioned by the president and the chair of the committee have been great at immortalizing their icons. So young people get up and want to be like, he's still in school reading a subject, but he has conceptualized what he wants to be like at 90, because they've been great at putting iconic 90, 80-year-old men in front of the professional. Say, don't worry, follow this path and you'll be like him. It's important how you celebrate the iconic practitioners in your field, because it gives inspiration to the younger ones to come along. Then there's what the forever value proposition. Forever value proposition. The forever value proposition is about what do I sell to a professional along his entire lifetime value as a member that can be useful till the day he dies. Okay, so beyond being president, beyond being council member, what else can I give? At the NSG, we have a layer above council members called patrons. And with patrons, we have things that patrons do till the day they die. So you see old men in their 80s and 90s, when they come, they have roles and responsibilities, things they must do till they die. Yeah, a forever value proposition is very powerful, because the younger practitioners walk around seeing people they only read about in books, walking past, saying hello, giving a word, providing some wisdom, steadying the hands of a younger generation. Membership economies that grow don't kill off their past. They build the past. It's part of the compelling journey that makes the younger ones see that there's a way their journey will be managed into the future. But for someone starting out in their career, a membership economy should provide a compelling journey management. If I start here, I can end there. And normally it's driven by a subscription model. Part of the subscription model is that it can become transactional. So the key question is, how do you make your subscription model transformational, where it's not just about the money, right? It's not just about the money. So the key question with subscription model is that many membership organizations become stock transaction. Now the question is, how can you make it transformational? How can you make it beyond the money, where members spend beyond their membership subscription on the community? They sponsor beyond their membership. They volunteer beyond their membership. They sacrifice beyond their membership, because the practice is then bigger than any individual group of us. Now, some big idea to think about in terms of community of practice is that you must share common concerns, not just common competencies, common concerns. And one of the ways this happens is you socialize new concerns as it affects the profession, so that it is owned by a common body of individuals. And for a profession like chartered secretaries and administrators, and a broader profession of governance, like I pointed out, there are many concerns that can become your concerns. I asked the council when I visited earlier in the year, what is your stake in Nigeria? Because once you define what your stake in Nigeria is, your concerns will become clear to you, and then how you pursue those concerns may go beyond the current scope of operation. Now, communities of practice provide for a systematic way to think about big collective critical inquiries and reflections, that are focused on building shared identity and collective intelligence. And this is important. If you are providing insights here that nobody can get from anywhere else. People that need the insight will come here. So the question within the community of practice itself has to be, how do we assemble the kind of knowledge about this practice that we can only find here? There are three ways this is done. One is use the collective to generate the intelligence. Okay? What the members know individually, we put it together, only the collective here will generate it. So what we call crowdsourced intelligence. Okay, it could be intelligence about how secretaries are doing. The 5 top challenges of administrators in 2021, 2022. So surveys, those type of analytics can generate insights that are now shared among the members, and that in itself becomes unique. So the critical intelligence required to keep a committee of practice is not outside the committee of practice. It's mostly inside the committee of practice, but it has not been tapped. Okay, so I want to challenge the research function in ICSAN to build a system for inquiry, critical inquiry. What are the 5 challenges that members are dealing with the most? Those 5 challenges should become food diet courses in the next year. Those things automatically change the dynamic, because the dynamic is now demand-led. Please write demand-led. It is critical that communities of practice stay ahead of the demand that the practitioners are feeling. Because if the practitioners, I remember your prof and I were at a different membership institute retreat, and the practitioners were ready to move on to something else. The field had transformed. The dynamics had changed. New skills were on demand. And the question is, if I need 5 new skills added to the package and it's not here, I'll go get it somewhere else. If the market now demands it. So demand-led, please come to your neighbor and say to your neighbor, this must be demand-led. So whatever the conversation you have is not simply about what comes to your pocket, it's about the fact that society is changing, the market is changing, the economy is changing. If when you look at the economy, when we are designing the membership economy, it does not respond. It does not have the critical intelligence, collective intelligence, to respond to the demands. It then becomes problematic. So I want to challenge the research function of ICSAN to be demand-led. Okay, to think about what are the areas over the next 5 to 10 years that will be useful. So let me give you an example of an area that I found interesting. I was saying to one of our colleagues at ICSAN, I said, new roles are emerging that are really chartered secretaries and administrators. They don't just call it that. Very good one is chief of staff in the private sector. The chief of staff in the private sector is doing everything a chartered secretary and administrator does, but they call them chief of staff. Now, that function is growing globally. If we can map and adjust, okay, so you can now call it chartered secretaries and administrators as chief of staff. If that's what it takes. If that's what it takes, okay, those adjustments are responding to demand. The skill set doesn't change. They are not doing anything different from what a chartered secretary and administrator does. They're not giving it a new name. If those of you that have ever met a governor, his chief of staff does everything that an ICSAN certified practitioner should do, right? Those are some of the most powerful people in this country. We have not a certification program for them. Please, election will soon be over. There will be many new chiefs of staff. Mr. President, sorry, this can't wait till next year. You have to design a program that is good to go out of the door from both chiefs of staff at local, federal, state, National Assembly, judicial, wherever they are, because it makes sense. Okay, your competency model is what they are looking for. All clerks of the national, there will be a new set of clerks across the entire National Assembly, at committee level, at institutional level, all of them to a partnership with Niels. Clerk as chartered secretaries and administrators. Niels will deliver that. So committee of practice are made. They are not sacrosanct. Their boundaries are not as rigid as we make them. They are made. They're made by people with common interests. And I think if you look at our common interest in governance and the skill sets that a chartered secretary and administrator has, one of the big goods we can do the institute is to ask, where do they apply in the institutions that build nations? And if we can think like that, I'm sure we'll make some progress. So let me move on because of time. Now, there are some dynamics to committee of practice competitiveness. The first is domain. You have to pick your domain, and I think the domain has been picked for ICSAN already. Your domain is governance, okay? Because your domain defines interest, defines competence, it defines commitment, right? The competency architecture around which ICSAN is built brings together the old chartered secretaries and administrators are now the entire governance professional framework into one. But that framework is being transformed. And that's what is creating this launch of encroachment into your community and your practice. So when we discuss the competitiveness of the community of practice, you must have domain, you must have community, you must have practice. You must have domain, you must have community, you must have practice. Okay? So just because of time, I want to pick some governance domains. So this is a set of governance domains. No particular order, but ladies and gentlemen, expanding domains to governance seems to me as a viable strategy for thinking about where ICSAN should go. And there are many approaches to this thing. There's democratic governance. Of course, you can tell that we are bad at it in Nigeria. We don't even know how to build political parties. We don't know how to govern them. We don't know how to write their rules. We don't know how to operate them. You know, I keep hearing structure online. It's a very funny conversation. These archaic terms came in the 90s. In the time of our World War, you discuss party, not structures, you discuss party structures, party law, party constitution, party governance. And that's what the First Republic discussed. Because they brought in enough intellectuals to do the it may be, I don't know. This is not sorry, I'm not these are broad proposals for the crazy person that came outside ICSAN. So take everything I say as a pinch of salt. But there is a viable gap and need for democratic governance, particularly in the building of political parties. Most of the people that become appointed as secretaries in those things don't have a clue as to how to get up in the morning and do anything about it. They are struggling with the concept of the secretary to a political party. Now, I don't know how many, I think we have about 18 political parties with many sub-state structures that require governance, and it's all failing. And it's not failing because they don't want to try, they don't know how. So the skills are sitting in one place and then they are struggling over there. Maybe that's something we could look at. Then there's global governance. There are many of our countrymen that are trying to aim now for global governance. How do you govern multilateral institutions? Bible partnerships with the UN system, with other multilateral systems could build an interesting set of skills and competencies for multilateralism. Nigeria is failing woefully at multilateralism across board. We are signing, we as contracting government to almost 600 global treaties have bad secretariats for all those treaties, badly managed, badly followed through, badly implemented. whether you discuss IMO, ICAO, IATA, just touch anyone. The governance of our commitments are very bad. All that job, when we look at them, they're all chartered secretaries and administrator work. But they're in a multilateral global governance space. We haven't actively asked, and thought about maybe how do you provide the kind of certifications. And it doesn't change the core body of knowledge. What I'm asking is application. If you are going to be a secretary of an IMO secretariat, in addition to your current knowledge, you need multilateral law and institutions, UN system knowledge, and you need how to operationalize protocols, how to set up a multilateral secretariat, how to run, multi-nation coordination. There's a few additional competencies. E-governance, another interesting piece of governance, and of course, good governance, which goes into national governance as a whole. And then, of course, you have the environmental governance. Now, environmental governance and sustainable governance has created this ESG domain where everybody thinks it's their field. Okay, everybody has entered the road with 1 or 2 or 3 courses or diets. And while we are talking, new membership organizations are forming, right? Some of these are logical extensions of what ICSAN should have or should be doing actively. ESG is not going to stop going where it's going, and I think ICANN is on board, and many of the accounting professionals are on board. You need to be on board. SDG governance domains, generally, anything that deals with social accounting, political accounting, environmental accounting, in addition to financial accounting, have become logical areas of traditional responsibility, as we are now asking corporates to be responsible for the planet, the people, and the shared prosperity of all of us. Those roles are creating some of that. Like I've said, a clerk cadre of parliament, legal advisor cadre in the public sector. The legal advisor cadre in the public sector is very different from traditional legal profession, because they are driven heavily by an enabling act. And the enabling act creates new protocols for additional administrative assignments other than the traditional ones. Secretaries of regulatory agencies have a unique administrative requirement that simply being a lawyer does not give you automatically. And so there are viable opportunities also, that secretary role, executive secretary, technical secretary roles in government, quasi-government institutions, like I said, the chief of staff profession. So these are some logical expansions of the domain that I thought that I'll leave with you today. Okay, so let me move forward so I can close. Another thing to think about, ladies and gentlemen, as I move to a close, is the state of play. Membership economies are measured by the ability to do certain things. So what I will do is that let me just put up the indicators themselves because of time. You'll have my slides jump into it. In a membership economy, everybody can't be equal. I want to say this without sounding odd. But in the membership economy, we are not all equal, so there are categories. This summit should think about a mass strategy approach. Now, with mass strategy approach, you are thinking of how do I bring the largest volume of members in annually? Where would they come from? And normally, mass membership is driven by a lot of free stuff. And I know that Mr. Chairman of the membership committee spoke about the free programs running. So we call this fast-moving membership consumer goods and services. Okay, it meets the basic needs and wants, gets it going. The one thing you want to collect from your mass membership is referrals. Okay, it's referrals. That free is not free. You must have a system that extracts referrals. Every time they register for a free course, please put the name of 10 people or 5 people in the office that can be. And it's an IT problem. So sort it at the IT door. Don't make it cumbersome. as they register for a course, force the course to take them to where people simply make referrals. Don't make it more complicated than that. And that creates, this is, so your mass membership is with their high, it's normally your high volume. In terms of money, low value, okay, but high influence. Because if you get every member to make 3 credible referrals every quarter, right? At the end of the year, each member will have done, well, how many? 12. If each member does 12 times your current membership size without doing any aggressive jumping on the road marketing for members, you should at least have a direct proposition for membership to 12 credible people. That's what the referrals do for you. So it creates a referral marketing network. So your mass membership approach has to be simple, nimble, but it has to be organized properly so that you can account for all the 12 that will refer to you with a follow-through process to onboard them. And remember, because somebody referred, the person can play an important role in the onboarding process. So this is very important. Mass membership has worked in Nigeria already. Check all the churches. Doesn't need, this method does not need explanation. It's working well. Okay, it's working very well. It works well. Don't worry, it doesn't need any explanation. Just plug and play. Okay. Now, executive membership tends to be premium. It's target domain. You have to have targeted domain segments, and this is network marketing. This requires that someone that controls the door to a network brings you in. And I've told the council you have to use your honorary fellowship well here. Okay? You just use the tools of your recognition, the tools of your collaboration well to bring in networks that exist but are sitting outside. There's an entire National Assembly clerk network. There's an entire network of speakers of state houses and assemblies who by themselves are secretary administrators, who have secretaries to state government. Secretary is even in their name. Yeah? Secretary to the state government, who are proper by function, proper functional chartered secretaries and administrators of whole governments. Okay, this one, you have to find a way to bring them by baptism. You know, bring them all at once. Do a conference for secretaries to state government. This group makes sense. Okay, one, they are high value. If you charge them a premium, they'll pay. You know, they are moderate volume. There are not a lot of them. You know, their influence can be affected by their network. You know, after that first round, getting them to do some other big things will depend on whether we can move them to your elite. Now, exclusive elite memberships are super premium users. Okay. There are not many of them, so if you're going to do it, it has to be worth the institute's time in terms of value and influence. Because in terms of volume, they are not a lot. But imagine that the Speaker of the Federal House is a fellow and is a fellow that believes in the role of chartered secretaries and what that does for the institute. And you and the Speaker can convene a conference of state speakers. Okay, where you are providing all the education in the room for that event to hold. Okay, so that becomes an exclusive type membership. It's premium, but and then we can charge them a little bit more money. Okay, so it's high value, high influence because they just have to point to the next. They can say to their clerks as ongoing education. Everybody above the GL level 10 in the state's houses of assembly, who, by the way, by GL 10, you are now qualified to be a clerk of a committee. Okay, and they start to do clerks, the actual work of chartered secretaries and administrators at a committee level, right? You can then use that as high-level influence in them. But we have to think about membership categories like this because you're running an economy and the economy must balance.
Value, the word value here is money, please. You can change value and put dollars. Just so you're not confusing what value here. There's no value proposition. No, it's not honesty, integrity, it's money. Can't run a membership economy without cash. The balance sheet matters. Please, it matters a lot. Your scale, your size, what you can flex and move. When you want to pass a bill in the National Assembly, I mean, I have a group that is constantly National Assembly pushing bills. I can tell you for free, it's not, even when you're not bribing anyone, it's not a piece of cake. When the bill is ready, you convene a conference of lawmakers. And you spend 3 or 4 days just educating lawmakers on the bill. So you fly all of them to Lagos, put them in a hotel and educate them on the bill so that they don't say nonsense. Then you will draft the bill yourself, so that there's no misdraft. Then you give it back to them to look, they're educated, and they go and then they do first read it. Then it gets to the committee. Committee now starts consultation with every stakeholder in Nigeria. That then becomes a different investment. So by the way, some of these things really do require money behind it, and that money has to come from value. So put dollars there. That's why I say high value is high dollars. So we are clear that I'm not talking about something else. One thing to think about, and close with this. I have more slides than walk through, but that's on purpose, so you can take a look at the slides later. Is when you look at membership values, right? Real values now. Values are shared, actionable objectives. Who we are, right? Who we stand for, the standards and the ethics by which we function, our ethos, right? It's a combination of several things, but membership values should be foundation, right? It's a key value proposition because people want to be part of the profession that stands for something. 2, body of knowledge. Membership economies that last must own some body of knowledge. I and Prof were talking, his former president came to be CEO of the NESG. And when, Jai resumed, I said, come, there's no body of knowledge here. We have to create some body of knowledge. Okay? You can't run a membership organization that is a knowledge society without bodies of knowledge. And so we went, and we found that the bodies of knowledge was the head of our predecessors. So your Ahmed Joda, you had a Shoneko, and we sat the old men that said, okay, can we collect what is in your head that was not collected? And so we codified all their knowledge into reform education, and that's how we created our own body of knowledge. But you must have. If you don't have a body of knowledge, you're not part of the knowledge society, you're doing something else. Eh? Even cults, even traditional cults have coded bodies of knowledge. Yes, okay? There's a reason why. It codifies membership into a set of progressional experiences that changes the mind, the heart, and the practice. If members are not changing, their minds are not expanding, their skills are not changing as they move, something is wrong with how we have designed the process. Okay, the question they shouldn't be asking is, what are we gaining here in terms of knowledge? No, that should be a given, right? Now, practice and expertise is the tougher part, because while I can teach you the knowledge here, you can't practice here. You have to go and practice out there. But expanding the opportunities to practice, internships, mentorships, coaching, then become viable ways to build a pathway from knowledge to practice. And so how do we think of how older ones coach younger ones, counsel younger ones as their careers grow, emerge, and develop? I find that my young people want to volunteer some committees with the leaders that they deeply respect. Okay, so when I say to a young person, you're going to spend 7 days volunteering every month on a committee, and they look on the committee and it's all the people they respect. They are excited to go and volunteer, right? Even if it's for a stipend, because they know that the transfer of experience and expertise in that space, something that they will not be able to buy. Plus the network, because anyone that can observe you can promote you. In fact, if what you're doing, nobody is observing it, that can promote you. You can die as a very good, skilled person in a corner of the world, right? So how do we take our younger practitioners and create spaces where they are exposed to more seasoned practitioners? We at the NSU use the summit process. Right? Summit process is a set of seminars, workshops, which puts young people in committees. They are listening to the older people debate the national issues. They are taking note, they are writing the reports up. They get better at writing, they get better at presenting because they must present to their committee leaders before they ever come to present the larger policy group, etc. So think about how we get more practice going. Then service to community. This is a tricky one because most members think that when they pay their membership subscription, service to ICSAN has ended, right? How do we build a volunteer workforce that understands that service to ICSAN is beyond the membership subscription? It's a values thing, but this is a fight you must win. A membership economy will never have all the money to do all it needs to do. So it must inspire its members to come along to do some additional things for the community. Okay? But these things have to be, one, recognized. Okay? And recognition is the lowest level. The law of recognition is what you recognize will be repeated. What you don't recognize will exit your life, right? That's the law of recognition. So if you do not recognize people's volunteering, their commitments, don't expect them to do it again. Okay? So how do we create a structure that recognizes that if this event was put together, a couple of people likely made some investment of time or resources, and there's a way to recognize them. Now, how do you build recognition into progression? Okay, if membership is purely by passing the exam and moving up, then everybody will pass exams and move up and not pay attention to the other things. But if progression requires that you're coaching, if you cannot be a fellow at ICSAN without coaching, mentoring younger people, doing some training and workshops and volunteering, what happens is that that's what people will do. Conduct permitted, conduct taught. Okay? The behaviors you want in your membership economy are the behaviors you should design or reward. The behaviors you want in your membership economy is the behaviors you should design into your reward system. This is important. Now, there may be more than one pathway to leadership, from a graduate member to a patron, right? But even how you reward leadership from outside your community or within your values has to follow a process. If, for example, you want to confer an honorary fellowship on someone, there has to be a process we do it by that still confers the principles of values, knowledge, practice, service to community, leadership within the community, etc. Okay? But please understand this, that if any, and I've seen this in many membership economies in Nigeria, they restrict membership to the certification alone and progression to only passing the exams. What happens is that you have members who pass your professional credentialing, but do not have any loyalty and commitment to the membership economy. You want to build both. Certain levels are examination based. I passed my exam, you give me my certificate. They're credential based. But certain levels must be a combination of the tangibles and intangibles of the community. Okay, that show that the person is bringing a grasp of the domain, a grasp of the community, a grasp of the practice. And that's what then transforms what you have there into a new model where what happens is you show a clear path from the bottom to the top with clear steps of value addition and value creation. And then you have institutional sustainability coming from leaders that can hold the institution's future long after they are gone. The final task of my patrons at the NESG is endowment. The final conversation that I have with an NESG patron is, Baba, you're going, eh? You've now finished your work on earth. It seems as if you're closer to God than you are to men. This thing you've started, our children's children have to come and meet it. So leave something behind. Huh? So patrons start to think about the future. Will Ikeja have a campus? Let's buy land. I have all land here. I'm not building it in. My family will see it as endowment. Okay, so you are discussing more than subscription economy. You're not discussing your endowment economy. Okay, next time I come here, I would like to hear $1 billion endowment for Ikeja. Okay, where the proceeds pay for scholarship for the first 10,000 best students, which automatically puts 10,000 students a year into your membership, sorted for 20 years. Okay, that is what patrons bring to a community, and you have to think like that. Okay, you're in a country of 200 million people. Mr. Chairman of the Committee on Membership is right. You have to think like that. And your patrons also are your flex weight. There are fights in this country that are interesting fights. I've seen some of them. Where who shows up? Where who shows up matters. Where the person that shows up can also suddenly show up and say, how are you connected to that thing? I just like them. They're a nice group. You know? When they show up, they have to say, we are patrons. And we are here to defend our practice. Okay? So I want to challenge the summit to think about the whole patron layer. And patron layer must bring you high influence. But they must commit to your future. And they must commit to your future in tangible terms. They must align with your values. There must be people that when they say governance, you look at them, look at their lives, look at the institutions they build. They are the personification of governance. And if you create a plethora of them, a sizable number, the day a real fight shows up at Ikeja's door, it's them you send to answer the fight at the door. Yeah? So, in closing, ladies and gentlemen, the future is ours. It's what we make of it. Membership in a great institution to be forever. The job of the members here and the council is to make that forever possible. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.